Okay, so welcome to everyone. Welcome to the 2022-23 Humankind series. This is actually the last presentation for the semester, this fall semester. My name is Mike Nagel, and I teach history and political science here at West Shore, and I'm happy to be involved in tonight's event. Humankind is West Shore's cultural arts and lecture series. The series includes events like tonight's panel entitled Who's Working Remotely? How Technology in the Pandemic Has Changed the Nature of the Workplace. In the past, we've had lectures by outside speakers, but the series also includes musical performances, art exhibits, feature films, things like that. And this is the 6th year for the Humankind series. The focus of this year's events address the future of work. Now, I'd like everyone to be aware that the presentation will be recorded and it will be available at a later time on the West Shore Community College Humankind page. If you'd like to review some of the information presented, that'll give you a bit of an extra chance to see that. This evening's event involves a panel discussion with 4 individuals and their experience with remote work. I'll go ahead and introduce each of the speakers now. Natalie Grahusky's remote work experiences include writing, publishing, and teaching online. In 2019, Wayne State University Press published her memoir, Welcome to Replica Dodge. Natalie will discuss her experiences as she recently accepted a full-time position as a writer for the Icahn School of Medicine at New York City. We also have, we're joined with Ben DeBeck. He and his wife recently moved to the area due to the flexibility provided by working remotely. And this has allowed them to relocate from a metropolitan region to Ludington as they raise their young children. And he's going to focus on the flexibility that he's been able to participate with. Scott Smith is president of Smith & Eddy Insurance, where he is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the company's multiple locations. Scott will explain how working remotely creates opportunities for employees and employers, but can make collaboration more difficult. Our format for tonight is for each panelist to provide a short presentation, 12, 15 minutes, which should leave us time for Q&A at the end. If you do have questions, please post them in the Q&A function, and we'll try to address some of the questions that may come up during tonight's presentation. Our first panelist this evening is Natalie. Go ahead and take it away.
Sure, I'm just going to share my screen here. Can everybody see my screen? Yep, Mike? Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Again, my name is Natalie Grahusky, and I'm going to talk about tonight what it means to be both a creative in the world, but also be part of this kind of new wave of remote workers. I am a writer for the Mount Sinai Health System, which is an expansive organization. It's 8 hospitals in total throughout the New York City area. And it includes the Icahn School of Medicine, which is pictured here. The Icahn School of Medicine, it's named after Carl Icahn. And it's a teaching hospital and the training facility for future doctors and scientists. But again, this is just one part of the Mount Sinai Health System. But it's the part where most of my writing assignments, at least for now, are centered. I work for the digital marketing department. So a lot of web copy and messaging and ad campaigns. Again, it's a fully remote position. And so a lot of what I do every single day is to think carefully about the kind of language that will engage, recruit, retain, the kind of students, faculty, researchers, physicians that Mount Sinai Health System wants to educate and employ at Icahn School of Medicine. So it's really absorbing work. It's really interesting work and powerful work because I've always loved language. I've always been a writer, but now I get to share the story of an organization that is literally saving lives and that I really believe in and respect. So again, just as a reference for the remote nature of my job, so Icahn School of Medicine is a 4-block campus in borders Central Park, right in New York City. And it has this really interesting patient population because it straddles the neighborhoods of affluent Yorkville, where there are lots of people with private insurance, and then but also underserved East Harlem. So they have a really interesting and diverse patient population and student population there. But just as kind of a contrast, so I'm thinking about this organization a lot every single day, but here's where I do that thinking. So my husband and I own 4 acres off of a dirt road here in Mason County. And this was taken right outside my front door a couple of weeks ago, again, before it was snowing. But it actually highlights one of my favorite parts of my job, which is, every single day I have a few Zoom meetings. They're short and to the point. But I get the privilege of hanging out with some really interesting people, with New Yorkers who I've, at least in the 2 months since I started my position, I've found are hilarious. They're not rude. They're just direct. They're loud. They're interesting, and they're very much like brass tacks. Let's get to the point, right? But then I have my writing that I do every single day, but then I also get to take a lunch break and I get to walk the dogs, and I'm around, sugar maples that are 100 years old, and it's very quiet. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I get a little slice of New York City, which I was raised in and around Houston. So it satisfies the little city girl that's still inside of me, that's alive and doing well. But then I also get to be in the beauty and solitude of West Michigan. So, I wanted to, in terms of speaking about my remote experience, I wanted to refer to this recent Gallup poll, which demonstrates a couple of things. First of all, you kind of can see the charted changes that we've all endured in the last couple of years in terms of the workforce. Only 8% exclusively remote before the pandemic. Within the pandemic, 39%, so nearly 40%. The American workforce was exclusively remote. And now that has backed off a little bit, right? Because we're kind of finally getting back to normal. But data scientists are saying that it's never going to go back down to 8%, right? So it's leveling off at 24%. And they're saying that we expect this to, part of the sector of the economy of remote workers just continue to grow. But what I think is really intriguing about this Gallup poll is when you look at the preferred location, right? So right now, exclusively remote work is at that 24%. It's expected to grow a little bit, but I think what's going to continue driving that growth is the preferred location of nearly a third of the workforce, right? 32%. But most people actually want something hybrid, right? They want some interaction face-to-face. They want someplace to go into the office, some days like that, but they also want the flexibility of some remote, aspects of their job. So that's 60%. And only 9%, at least according to this poll, are saying that they actually want to go into the office every single day. So that's a really, that's an interesting economic snapshot. And of course, it includes a plethora of different industries. But, personally, it's meant a whole heck of a lot to me as a creative, as an artist in the world, to find my place in that economy and to find meaningful employment, doing work that I love. I've always loved writing. I've loved writing from an early age. I was the kind of kid who came off the bus in kindergarten, and even before I could write, my mom would take computer paper and staple it together, and she'd say, "Okay, what's your story today, Natalie?" And so I'd tell her a story, and then I'd do the pictures. So it's just something that has been with me my whole life. But it's also something, it's meant a lot to me as somebody who has kind of at different points been told, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, that I would not be able to secure meaningful, well-paying work doing what I love in the world, right? Which is sometimes the message that artists hear. And, thankfully, especially now, it's just not true anymore. Especially in this post-pandemic jobscape that we've all found ourselves in, there are lots of opportunities and lots of remote opportunities for artists and creatives. So I found my position at Mount Sinai Health System by going to Indeed, and I've just referenced a couple of different kinds of positions. One of the things that I like about Indeed is that you can filter all sorts of ways. You can look for full-time work, part-time work, remote work, on-site work, contract work. And so if you go to Indeed and you search for graphic artist or editor or songwriter or photographer or designer or illustrator, I think what you're going to find is that by and large, organizations are searching for these creatives. And now with remote work, you know, the really exciting thing about that is that it gives you the freedom to kind of pick your place, which is maybe something like I'm sure we're going to hear about that from Ben and how meaningful that's been to him. So in conclusion, I have one more slide. So what do we do with all of that in terms of thinking about this remote work, in terms of being a creative person within that remote sector, the way that I landed my job through Indeed, and thinking again about the variety of different artistic positions that are available on Indeed. I would say that we probably need to carefully consider the kind of messaging that we're sending to the creatives in our lives, particularly the young creatives who are sometimes told, again, directly or indirectly, that, okay, either you're going to have to be a starving artist, or you're going to have to set that art aside and do something more practical. So if you know somebody who's, you know, mind, body, and heart and spirit and all of that lights up when they do something artistic, I think it's important to tell them, you know, that's a real possibility for you. There's a profession out there for you, and it could be something that you don't even have to relocate, or you can live wherever you want. So that's kind of the conversation that I hope we start having with the creatives in our life. Thank you. Oh, we can't hear you, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, I think you're muted.
Yes, I'm muted. Okay, you'd think that I would know that I have to unmute myself. But anyway, thank you, Natalie. I really like that photo of you know, the road where you live and that. So and so I suspect that you're going to have some questions that are directed toward you. Let's go ahead and have Ben go ahead and start his presentation. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Hey, thanks, Mike. My name is Ben DeBeck. I work as a senior manager of reporting and analytics for Kelly Services. I've been there for about 15 years at this point. I started working from home in 2012, actually. I was one of those lucky 8% that Natalie had mentioned earlier. And the way I wound up into it was actually by accident. Our office was going through renovations, and we were asked to just work from home for a few months. And that's basically turned into, you know, almost the last decade. So it's been nice, though. There's a lot of pluses to it. And plus, working from home wasn't necessarily a new concept to me. My mother worked from home in the 90s. She was a medical transcriptionist. She'd go doctor's offices, pick up her tapes, bring them back and work from home. It seems always to me like a sort of a natural thing to do. Working from home definitely has a lot of benefits for myself and my family. You know, there's a lot to work-life balance these days, and that's kind of a big thing in any industry. And what I have found is that by working from home, you're able to balance it out a lot easier. It's not difficult to be able to step away for an hour for a kid's doctor's appointment, or, you know, have lunch with your wife if she works from home like mine does. You know, there's a lot of nice things to it. On top of that, we did have the opportunity to move to Mason County, to Ludington. My father's family's from this area. We always came to visit. We were married here. My wife fell in love with the area, and we just had an opportunity to be able to move the family up and not lose our jobs or think about how are we going to find new jobs. So that by itself has been a huge bonus. On the flip side, though, when talking about that work-life balance, is that when everybody works from home, some boundaries do get kind of pushed a little bit, kind of broken. It's not surprising to get emails, IMs, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and there is an expectation that you're going to answer them. Because it's not like how it used to be. It's not like you just walk into the office the next day and go through your emails or go through IMs. Everything is coming to you all the time, particularly with all the mobile technology. So really, though, the pluses certainly outweigh, for my family at least, any of the cons to it. We've been able to really fulfill a lot of the things that we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to raise our kids in a smaller town outside of the metro area, and still be able to afford to do the things that we wanted to do, which we've been able to. So overall, it's been a very positive experience. One of the other things I wanted to touch on was managing remote teams. And as I had said, I started being remote about 2012, but I actually started managing remote teams in 2008. There was a kind of a new idea for at-home call centers at the time. And the company I worked for had a opportunity to bid on one. And we basically created it from the ground up. So our client was an electric company in Houston, Texas. All of our workers were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we all worked in Troy, Michigan. So in 2008, that was pretty revolutionary, pretty new. And it added a lot of intrigue and interest in how to manage people from that kind of distance. Training, just general communication, all kind of flipped on its head to try and find new ways to be able to communicate and be able to get through to everybody. The old days of shadowing people, of just sitting next to them and learning from them, was gone. There was a lot of employment of looking at videos and doing videos so that people could learn that way. Silently just listening into a phone call so that they could learn how to be able to, deal with customers. So that by itself was unique. As I changed positions, as I moved around a little bit within the company, I'm still managing a team that are all at home and all in different states. And it still remains a bit of a challenge today to be able to bring that team cohesiveness together for training. There's a lot of things that you can do online, but there is definitely things that are missing when it's not that one-on-one human interaction. And that is a challenge, and I think it will continue to be a challenge. There are more and more tools out there to be able to collaborate, but there's still nothing quite like that one-on-one experience, either with your manager or with a coworker. So I think those sort of lack of technology, better lack of a word, is going to continue to be an issue and things that people are going to have to work on. So that is pretty much my presentation for today. If we have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or we can wait till after.
All right. No, that sounds great. I mean, I really like the perspective that you're offering, that you've been working remotely for so long. And I'm sure that that's going to generate some interest and some questions in that. But I think we'll hold off on some Q&A and let Scott go ahead and go next. And I suspect that the three of you will probably have some questions from our audience. And if not, I may ask a few. So anyway, Scott, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Well, first of all, this is great because I get to hear two people with Natalie and Ben talk about, why it's so great to work from home. But I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna spin this a little bit, and I'm gonna talk about how, as an employer and as the manager of a business, we've got to balance that in. Okay, we've got to find a way that it is okay to work from home. And I think these are both great stories. I loved hearing both, because obviously the three of us really don't have a relationship with one another. But to know that Natalie works for a business in downtown New York and Ben works for Kelly Services, doing what they do, where they do it, really is a piece of that puzzle that as an employer, it's great for me to hear, because this is where we're at today. And I'm going to take a little bit of what they said, and I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. I did throw a couple of bullet points together, so I'm going to see if this works. And Mike, if you'll just confirm that I do have my sharing here is working. I'm going to click here, make sure I get this, and see if this works. Did that work?
It started. Yep, it's getting there. Yeah, you bet. You're
Okay.
good.
All right. So, the first thing that we have to recognize as a business is we have to recognize where we're at today, right? Why do we have these conditions that we have today? And quite honestly, COVID just pushed everything along. That's all this did. This was going to happen anyways, but it just pushed it along. And, I like to say we were on Zoom before Zoom was cool. Okay. So the biggest thing that we gain as an employer, all right, now I'm looking at the talent and the limited labor pool that we have. And I think Natalie made mention about just being able to have a limited number of people who would be eligible for a job, but because we can work remotely, now we open up this big pool of people. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we're only seeing your screen now, like your background. So I think that you might have clicked. You had that PowerPoint up, and
Try it again.
Yeah, you want to try that again?
Let's see if we can do that again.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm glad you did.
Because it was working fine, and then I think maybe just it went to a different tab or something like that, maybe on your computer.
How's that?
Okay, so yeah, so we're good.
Now we're good. Okay.
Yep.
I think what happened, did it go away just now?
No, you're good right now.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, now it just left.
And it's back.
Now it's back.
All right, we're gonna leave it alone. You know what that is? That's too many monitors.
Sure.
Okay. So when I'm looking away, don't think I'm not looking at the camera. I'm looking at my other screen. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to close that. I'm going to stop sharing because I think that's kind of hard. Okay. So I got some notes anyways. You always got to be ready to audible in this stuff too. And so that was one of my points. But, when Natalie was talking about how the labor pool is one of the most important things to try and gain, this is what opens it up for us. Okay. When we advertise for a job in Mason and Manistee counties, we get this many people. But if we can advertise across the country, we've got this many people. From my standpoint, I'm able to attract a much higher quality person, maybe with more skill set, more knowledge, a better candidate, quite honestly. So it does pose a lot of challenges as well, and that's just incorporating that person into your business. But the thing that remote working does is it basically gives you the opportunity to attract and retain at a much higher level than we ever had before. Okay. And what we say today is that remote working is the new benefit. All right. It used to be that everybody wanted health insurance and everybody wanted a 401k and everybody wanted vision and dental and all these other, time off and bonuses. Well, today, flexibility is one of the biggest things that we can offer as an employer. And I've actually had people tell me that they would take more flexibility over money. And that's really a hard thing to comprehend. The other thing is that we found a really nice niche with people who do work from home. Maybe they have elderly parents or they have sick kids. Maybe they've just got some health concerns where they can't be out and about all of the time. We had a person who was working for us. He developed some cancer, and with treatments and everything, he was very sickly. So we allowed him to work from home. It worked really, really well. And again, we know what sick kids do. They sleep at home. So why not let the employees work from home? And then right now, I've actually got somebody at home with an elderly parent. And so, it really makes you feel good when you can, offer those kind of benefits, if you will. But it does come with some challenges. And that's the biggest thing that I really want to talk about tonight. And the biggest thing is communicating. In the way that we have to communicate is Ben said it best. And I wrote down what he said, but he was talking about listening and shadowing and talking about, just with your coworkers. And that's the tough part. Because what we call that in our business is intellectual idea sharing. The old days of looking over the top of your computer and asking a question are gone, okay? Now, like Ben was talking about, you've got to do this training from home. That's a challenge, okay? You've got to find ways to communicate you got to find ways to communicate more with your staff in different ways, because it just doesn't work anymore because people aren't in the office, okay? And the other thing that does is it creates you have to find a way to balance the continuity of your office. When you've got people at home and you've got people in the office, inevitably people think that the people at home aren't working as much as the people in the office, and the people at home think they're doing more than the people in the office, and the people in the office think they're doing more than the people in the office. And it's a balancing act, and you've got to be able to manage all of the different sectors that you've got people working in, and so it becomes really, really tricky. The other piece of the puzzle that we've worked really, really hard on is maintaining our culture. Our culture is that we work hard and we play hard. And when you have somebody that's not in the office every day, or not in the office on a regular basis, or as I think Natalie or Ben talked about, a hybrid version, that becomes really, really hard to instill your corporate culture when you don't have people in the office every day. So communication, the continuity, and the culture become a balancing act into the future, all right? And we recognize this. I have a saying in our office that I used to hate the water cooler talk because those conversations went on and on and on. Well, now with people working at home, it's not water cooler talk, it's video talk, or it's on the phone talk, or it's instant messaging talk. So that's changed. And the number one thing that we try to do when anybody works from home, and this is really, really hard to do, is to keep them off of an island by themselves, okay? We talked about the camaraderie and the communication and the continuity and the culture. When you work at home, you're on an island by yourself. And we really don't like the island because the island secludes you, okay? So we try to bring people in. We try to have weekly meetings where everybody's on the meeting at the same time. We want to know what's going on at home with that person, if that's where they're working, and we want them to know what's going on in the office. So we have regular meetings scheduled. As a matter of fact, through COVID, we were meeting almost every morning on video because I felt it was super important for our staff to see one another and understand what everybody else is feeling. So it's super important to try to balance and avoid the island. Lastly, I broke down some of the other things that we have that challenge us. And the number one thing that we have in Mason and Manistee County that challenges us is broadband, or what I like to say, the lack thereof, the internet and high speed. Without that, we are dead in the water. We can't be doing what we're doing tonight. And that presents a challenge. Computer systems don't work fast enough. Hotspots can't keep up. I don't want people working at McDonald's or coffee shops, okay? We have secured servers that we have to dial into, and that just doesn't work. So security and high-speed internet are critical. And right now, we know that in Mason and Manistee counties, we've got some outlying areas where it's just not an option to be able to work remotely and have this kind of speed. So that's something that we as a territory get challenged with. From a phone standpoint, you know, everybody's operating now on these voice over internet phones. It's very common. They kick right over to your cell phone. Your cell phone actually becomes your work phone. You have dedicated numbers, and the internet has really cleaned up the phone systems that we as businesses and that we put into actually people's houses. It just created an entirely new way of doing business simply because of the internet phone. And some of my people at home don't even have phones. They actually just communicate right through the computer as it serves as a phone through their microphone. This right here, Zoom, right? I said we were on Zoom before Zoom was cool. How many opportunities do we have today to do business via video, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Skype or Zoom or any of the other various video feeds? They're out there today like never before, and they're only going to keep getting better in ways of just enhancing the options that you have and the features that you have and the functionality, quite honestly, just making them better. One of the other things that we use all of the time with our remote people is they're not meeting with customers. They're not coming into their home. They're not coming into the office. The evolution of DocuSign. Going in and signing documents anymore, anywhere is almost a thing of the past. DocuSign, FormStack, e-sign, it's all where it's going, okay? Those documents come instantly back to you. Nobody wants to come into offices anymore, whether those are banking offices, real estate offices, insurance offices. If you can get a document by e-sign, it's probably going to come to you that way in the near future. And it's something that's really, for our people who have the high-speed internet and have all the technology, it's been a game changer for us. When we talk about our preferred methods of communication, we like to think about what's the best way for us to communicate with our employees and our customers. And we're using instant messaging, we're using text messaging, we're using email, but you have to establish what works for each person, because some people like email and some people like text message and some people like instant message. We can actually instant message through our phone system, and it's really neat. But you have to find out so that people, when they do get it, we're trained now that we want information fast. And if I need an answer, I want to be able to send it to somebody. And if they're at home working, I want to know that, hey, I'm going to get my response back quickly. So when we do have people working remotely, we know that the fastest way to get an answer from them is through one of those three methods. Is it an email? Is it a text message? Is it an instant message? How do they want to be contacted? And then we use that same processes with our customers as well, so that we know what's the best way to get them, okay? And then I think the last thing that's really helped our business is simply the applications that we have today on our cell phone. It's really been what's changed it. If we wanted tonight, we could actually do this Zoom meeting on our cell phone. You know, our agency has invested in an enormous amount of technology into the customers being able to do what they need to do. I have a very powerful database system that is actually on my phone and on my laptop computer. So if I'm out, I still have the ability to work in the field. I can upload pictures into a customer's file. I can file claims. I can make card changes. I can do about anything that I need to do from my cell phone. So the phone apps, if we think about all of the things that have made our lives easier, think about all of the apps on your phone, and they have created an enormous new segment of, in a new way of doing business. And it's really what I think is one of the biggest changes that we've seen. So, you know, I like to look at it from that perspective. We have a balancing act. I want to keep my culture with the people that I have working for me, because I feel so important about that. And Natalie and Ben, I hope that you guys are trying to stay connected with Mount Sinai and Kelly Services being remote, because I think that's one of the most important things that you guys can do.
Well, I think that this is great. We've got about 15 students or something like that, maybe who are on. And so what we see here is we've got someone who's new to teaching or to working in the remotely, you know, with Natalie. Scott, we've got an employer, okay, and a local employer, all right. And then we've got Ben, who's with Kelly Services. And so we see that if for these students who are going to be looking for jobs sometime soon, we've got these different perspectives in that. So if you, I'll go ahead and ask a couple questions here, but if students or people who are here who've been watching, if you could write a question in the Q&A, we can have one of these panelists or each of them address it. But there's a couple things that just kind of struck me. So Natalie, okay, one of the things that Scott talked about was that it's really important that people are not just on an island, that they're actually part of the team, and they've got that corporate culture. How has your employer tried to reach out with you to try to address that? And then maybe we can have a follow-up on the same question with Ben.
So I work in a 30-person team, and it's every single day, kind of like what Scott mentioned about during the pandemic, they were meeting every morning. We have something called the daily huddle, and I see my boss, my boss's boss, and my boss's boss every single day for 30 minutes. And he, you know, generally we just go down a list, and that's it's really helpful because even in like everybody will join, you know, a couple of minutes before John's on, and we'll visit, right? And so it builds some of that. So that's the first thing that's been really helpful, is that those daily huddles. The second thing that has really helped is that the Mount Sinai has a whole branding office, and I have been able to attend several trainings from the branding office to just get an idea of like, what is Mount Sinai? What do they believe in? What kind of people are they looking for? So those guidelines, and they just produce a ton of content all the time that's available on YouTube. So looking at that YouTube content as well has helped me. So those two things.
Ben, so that's great. That's really cool how they've worked with you. Ben, have you noticed different ways to try to connect with people? Because you've been working remotely for quite some time. And maybe you've seen some newer trends, like with trying to make sure that people are connected and that. So maybe you have some examples there.
Yeah, no, for sure. The company I work for is pretty large. My team itself that I manage is about 5 people strong. And so I meet with them individually every other week. Every week we have a team meeting, just to kind of get away from Scott's idea of that island, because it's there, it's real, and it does not work. It's a big issue when people start feeling isolated, because you know the quality and the quantity of work goes down for sure, because they're not feeling as appreciated, or they don't feel as though they have a voice. So making sure that everybody knows that they do have a voice, they have a place to go to, they have, you know, I've actually found that I think I have more personal conversations with my employees now that everybody works from home than I did when I managed people in an office. Because for a lot of people, or for a few at least on my team, I may be one of the few people they talk to during the day, because they don't get out, they don't do a lot, right? So, you know, I wind up, you know, boss and bartender in a way, which works, but you know, it's different for me, and I've had to pick up, you know, new skill sets for myself to be able to work with people and to be able to be that sounding board that they need. So that's been a challenge by itself.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Scott, what are some of the steps that you've taken from your perspective? So it's interesting that Ben's been like this bartender slash you know, boss, I guess, you know. So what are some steps that you take to try to address that?
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to use that boss bartender in the future. I like that.
It's yours.
Because it's truly what you do. And I always say that, you know, I have a business degree. I don't have a you know, sociology or a psychology degree, but there's so much that does play into it. You do have to listen a lot. But I think that the best thing that we do is we try to make sure that they're still the people at home are still staying connected. And not only are they staying connected to the business, but sometimes just individually having our people reach out. I will literally say to some of the directors, when's the last time you spoke to this person? When's the last time you spoke to this person? Just to call them up, make sure they're still feeling part of that team, because, you know, like, I'm glad to hear Ben say that this island thing does exist, and it's really hard, and you've got to work at it, and whatever it takes, whether it's, you know, just constant, you know, communication, or sending messages, following up, making once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever it takes to reach out to those people who aren't sitting in the office. It's something that you really have to work at.
All right. Well, we have a couple of questions from our audience. And so Katie is asking, do any employers use an employee monitoring system to keep tabs on whether employees are at their computers working during specified hours?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm gonna say that what we do is, there are a lot of programs out there in the last 2 years that have popped up. They'll actually track keystrokes, they'll track productivity. We don't use any of those type of systems, but what we do is, at the end of the day, we get reports, and those reports indicate what was done during the day by each user in our system. And we call that an activity report. And we can tell, it totals it up. It tells us the customer they worked on. It tells us what they did for the customer. It really lays out what they do. So that's a great, because again, those people at home think they're doing more than the people in the office, and the people in the office think that the people at home aren't doing as much as they are because nobody's there and nobody's watching them. And it's anything but the case. And what we have found is some of the people from at home are much more productive because they have less interruptions. They have less interruptions than the people in the office. And so when those people are saying, well, what are they doing from home? We got to be really careful. We don't want to look and say, okay, well, you want to know what they were doing from home? Their activity report is far greater than those people sitting in the office.
Do the employees does employee X get to see his or her activity, or is it just the supervisors? Or
no, you can see your individual report today, but you can't see other people's.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's good. All right, Ben, do you have any experience with that? With Katie's question about monitoring people's activity and their keeping tabs on them?
So we don't have like an activity report like Scott's speaking of. I do know that I can request something like that can be applied to somebody if I'm feeling as though there's some issues going on. Because of the size of my team and what we do, we provide analytics and reporting for various customers within Kelly. I can guarantee you that if someone is not doing something, I'm going to hear about it very, 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 very quickly with anger and spitfire. So I know if people are doing something or if they're not. So I'm sort of lucky and not in that position.
Gotcha. Okay. We've got another question for Scott. Scott, you talk about being able to do a large amount of work from your phone. This person is a huge advocate of this. I wish there was an app for everything in life. However, how do you ensure that you leave work at work and create a healthy work-life balance? So maybe you could try to address that.
Yeah, actually, it's a pretty tough thing to do in today's world. I think Ben made mention of getting emails later in the evening. Mary's probably going to say the same thing. Unfortunately, it's really hard to leave work at work anymore because we are so accessible. Okay. And again, I don't have the balance for that one. If people are in need of something, we're in the business of customer service. We're in the business of, handling the problems that they have, and they never seem to have claims during the day. They're at night. So they're on the weekend and they're on the holidays. So you know what, for 30 years, my wife knows that there's always this chance I might run out on a holiday. And I wish there was a better answer, but unfortunately, that's a really, really tough balance. It's a great question.
What, just for me as someone who's teaching, at a college, I bring more work home now than I did 15 years ago. And I'll get messages from students, and try to address some things. And it's hard to try to, if I've got a student in crisis, I want to help him or her. So anyway. Anybody else want to
put something in there too, Mike? One of the things that we call it deposits and withdrawals. Okay. And you may have to work on a Saturday night, or you may have to work on a Sunday afternoon and helping a customer out with a fire or a tree or a car accident or something like that from our business. However, when you want to leave at 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock on that Friday afternoon because you're going on vacation and you need to get on the road, or you need to get kids ready, or you need to go to the parties at the school for all of the different, holidays, those are when you get those days back. And it's all about what we call withdrawals and deposits. And, you make some with deposits and then you get to take those out.
Anybody else want to talk about work-life balance?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was told by my boss when I started for Mount Sinai is she said, I really don't want you answering emails after 5. Medical professionals work around the clock. And especially if you're working for New York City doctors, if you start answering emails at night, they will start responding to you, right? So if you're doing like a stakeholder story or like working on an ad campaign, don't make the mistake of emailing this person after 9 p.m. because guess what? They're going to respond and expect you to respond. So I was specifically warned about that, just to try to create those boundaries for myself. It also helps to have young kids who storm into the house at 4 p.m. and I've got one more hour, and then I just want to, I'm with them. And I think the last thing that has really helped me is that I've scheduled downtime with my phone. So from 8 p.m. to like 6 or 7 a.m. every single morning, I just don't receive messages or anything like that. But again, I'm in a very different position than Scott or Ben. But I've appreciated the boss who said, you know, watch yourself.
All right. Now we have another question here, and this is like to any of you three. So, has working remotely affected you more positively or negatively? And what would you change about remote working?
I mean, for me, I would say it's definitely been a positive, just because of that flexibility of, you know, being able to kind of live wherever I want. And my wife works from home too. We both have that ability that we can pretty much pick anywhere in the country or outside of the country really, and live there if we wanted to. That by itself, that even if we don't always take advantage of that flexibility, the simple fact that it's there speaks volumes, because you're not tied to where your work is anymore. And I think that flexibility is huge. In terms of what I would change, I'm not sure. I think it's a lot of what we've already talked about, because there is a fundamental lack of community within the workplace by working from home. And if there's a good way to fix that, Scott, if you got some great ideas, you know, I think we'd all appreciate it, because I think that is the hardest part, because it makes everything more into a job than a career, which kind of goes back to Scott and his ideas of kind of, you know, that corporate culture. I think that corporate identity, corporate culture within is falling apart because of this. But I think the pros outweigh it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about, so I would say that it's overwhelmingly a positive for me as well. Not only, like Scott was talking about how it's allowing people in Mason County to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do, right? I would have fewer opportunities as a writer and an artist here in Mason County, but I have a lot of opportunities remotely, right? That's hugely meaningful to me as a writer. And so that's been a positive. And the other thing though that's hard, and this is kind of what Ben was touching on as well, is I'm a people person. I'm kind of married to an introvert. And so I actually used to work for West Shore Community College and know and love many people who work there. And so it's been a little difficult for me to be like just alone in my house every single day. But the way that I've ameliorated that in some way, shape, or form is that, you know, the great thing about West Shore is that it not only exists for staff and faculty, but for community members. And so every Friday I'll go to West Shore and I'll find a quiet space. And, you know, I'm not like doing secure server type of activities. I'm just writing. So I can see the people that I used to work with and have some face-to-face interaction. So I've kind of worked that into my own schedule of getting to where people are still and not sitting alone in my farmhouse for too long.
So we have another question. So do you think a new graduate can learn the ropes of a new career in a remote position, or should they initially seek out an in-office position as they start their work career? That's a great question.
That is a good one.
It sure is. You know, it's going to really depend on the field and the training that this person does bring to the table. You know, somebody just out of college, not having a lot of job experience, on the job training is really gone now, and training people remotely is a challenge. And that's one of the things that we work every day at trying to be better at, and we're nowhere near perfect at it yet. I think I had mentioned earlier that we actually use Zoom and we record the navigations and the buttons to click on and what goes after this click and then the next click and what you do and then drop this in. And, trying to create these training modules remotely is really, really tricky. And, I wished I could have people in the office, and it's probably something. We actually do have an intern right now. He does work 2 days in the office, 2 days at home. He's finishing up at Michigan State. But, those 2 days that he's in the office, they become our most valuable days with him. And our hope is that when he does graduate in the winter here, or in the late fall, that he's able to work from home. But he's been in the office for about 6 months. So, I don't have a lot of I'm not worth a lot right now from a training standpoint, because it's a challenge for us.
Ben, I wonder if you might address that, when in your line of work, finding positions for people to work.
Yeah, I have a pretty green person who started with us less than a year ago. It's the second job out of college, and he didn't have a lot of experience in analytics and in reporting, but he obviously had a will to learn and a want to learn. So we give him a shot, and he's doing great. But trying to get him up to speed has been really difficult. I can lean on the veterans on my team and say, take some time and spend time with him, but that doesn't really mean anything when there isn't any solid training for them to do. It's one thing. It's one thing when it was back in the day when you could sit in an office with somebody next to their cubicle and watch what they're doing and ask questions. It's 100% different when it's a call like this, right? When you're just watching somebody type randomly on their screen. I mean, either the trainee is going to completely zone out, or the person who's training is going to be so wrapped up in what they're doing that they're not actually teaching anything. It's just random keystrokes and formats and functionality that doesn't make any sense. So it's a complete struggle, and it's just a lot more one-on-one time, trying to get them up to speed. But yeah, the training has to move up and has to change and has to get better. And I think in terms of the person who asked the question, it's kind of what you want to do, right? I mean, what is it that you want to go into is going to help determine whether or not it's something that needs time in the office or something that can be done remotely as well. So
I wonder if we're going to have a new sitcom, 10 years from now, and it might be called The Office, but it takes place in people's homes. And there's 6 homes, and then there's 12 homes, and people not in cubicles, but they're in their pajamas and they're in their own home office and all that. So anyway, I guess we'll let the screenwriters try to address that one sometime.
Yeah, don't forget the kid that Zoom bombs you randomly.
Right. Yes, right. Exactly.
Hasn't happened to me yet, but it's gonna.
It probably will. Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And so I think this has just been awesome. So while this is the final Humankind presentation of the semester, we will be back in January for a full series of events. Our first one, I believe, in January will be Scottville's own Ken Eikenberry, January 23rd. But just make sure, for those of you in the audience, to check West Shore's website and the Humankind page. I also would like to give a shout out to our Performing Arts series. We hope that you will join us either December 3rd or 4th for the Holiday Rock Spectacular featuring Edgar Struble and several other artists. This will take place at the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts in Manistee. Tickets are available at the West Shore box office. I would also like to ask a favor of the people in the audience. As you leave the Zoom session, you'll be asked to complete a survey. This is really important and it's very helpful for us. So please let us know what you liked about the presentation, as well as any opportunities that we could implement to try to improve your experience. So I just want to say thank you to each of the panelists, and thank you to those who were able to watch this presentation. I hope you learned something, and thanks for joining us this evening. And do I dare say a good night and have a pleasant tomorrow? I think I stole that from SNL. What's that from? From the 70s? I don't know. It just kind of came to mind. So anyway, have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
So thanks a lot. Yeah.